Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. And actually, if I say anything coherent ever, it's a miracle. I can't really blame this lack of sleep. But we'll do our best this morning. And it's a great privilege to be able to be here at HTB. And this is the church I grew up in. I was christened here. And then when I was from about 4 years old, we moved back here. Used to sit in the pew when we had pews just about there. And this is a place where I've learned how to follow Jesus. And I've been prayed for countless times at the front here. And this is the church that's changed my life. And so it's a great honor to be able to speak this morning. And to be able to speak from the book of Philippians. What an amazing book. And it's a book where Paul is particularly keen on the church in Philippi. He loves that community. And so it's wonderful for me to be able to speak from this book. Paul loves the church in Philippi, and I love this church. So it is a great honor to be able to speak on this passage. So should we have a look at this passage? I think there are Bibles in the chairs. We're going to look at Philippians chapter 2 and beginning at verse 12. Philippians chapter 2 and beginning at verse 12, and it'll appear on the screens as well. Paul writes this: "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose. Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe, as you hold out the word of life, in order that I may boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor for nothing. But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me." I don't know how you feel about the limelight and being visible. I've always tried to avoid it. When I was 6 years old, I was at the school I was at, had a sports day. And the event that I was entered into was a slightly strange race. We had to run about 30 meters with this little, it was like a small beanbag. It was about this big that we had to run with on our heads. And so I was in this event. Now, I'm not particularly quick, but apparently I'm really good at running with this little beanbag on my head. Because I used to win this event in the practices again and again and again. And we practiced for the week running up to sports day. I should mention at this point that almost everyone at this school when I was 6 were girls. But I'm not into like gender stereotypes. So it's just impressive that I used to win all these competitions. And actually, yeah, I'm not quite sure why my parents sent me to what was essentially a girls' school. But actually, when I think about it, it probably explains quite a lot about me. But anyway, so I was running these races. I just used to win again and again. So that when it came to the sports day, there was no doubt in my mind that I was going to win. I was the favorite. And then the day came, and then I watched what happened in the earlier races. And if anyone won a race, they were put on this podium, and then people would gather around them and look at them and clap them, and they were given medals. And I thought, that's not a reward. That's some kind of cruel and unusual punishment. And I thought, I do not want that. So when it came to my event, I just stood on the starting line with the little beanbag on my head, and I just kept on letting it fall off and putting it back on until everyone else had finished the race. And I knew that there was no danger of me winning. And then eventually I started to run, because I didn't want anyone to look at me. I didn't want to be seen. And actually, so much of my life, I've tried to hide from being seen. And people like magicians who want volunteers from the audience, or stand-up comics who pick out people. They are the worst people in my mind, horrible human beings. And I just have this fear of being seen. And yet it's more complicated than that. Because there are times when I do like to be seen. There was this time about a few months ago when, as a church, we just had tidied up the church as a staff, and we put a bin at the front of church, and then we stood at the back, and we had this really light football. And we tried to see if we could kick the ball into the bin. And the first person to go was James, who was our youth pastor, he's a semi-professional footballer. Anyway, he went first, mishit it and hit a pillar. And I thought, okay, I'll have a go. I'll do better than him. And I lined it up, and I realized it's one of those balls that when you try and curl it one way, it goes in the opposite direction. It's one of those really light footballs. So I just tried to look like I knew what I was doing, hit it as hard as I could. It flew in the air, went round the rim, and dropped in the bin. And I was just so pleased. I thought, this is the greatest event in my life. And I was like, did everyone see this? And did anyone not video this so they could post it online? This is fantastic. Well, that's what I felt inside. But I pretended like it was no big deal. I just shrugged my shoulders. Yeah, that was what I expected to happen. And then someone said, oh, that was amazing. Did everyone say, oh, no, I don't want the trouble? And then someone said, oh, we should have videoed it. Oh, no, I wouldn't want anything like that. And I pretended like I didn't want to be seen, whereas in that case, I actually did. And so there's this mixture of wanting to be seen, but also wanting to hide. And I certainly don't want other people to shine or have all the attention. I was once a best man at a wedding, and there was another best man. And when it came to the speeches, he went first. And this other best man, who when he gave his speech, I was going to go right after him, he gave the funniest speech. People were crying with laughter. They were in hysterics, kind of falling off their chairs. And then it all reached this climax where he ripped off his shirt at the end. I still don't know why, to reveal this kind of incredibly ripped torso. And all the way through, I was thinking, this was one of my oldest friends, but all the way through, I was looking at him thinking, I hate you. And then looking at everyone else laughing, thinking, why are you laughing? You're only encouraging him. Just stop it. Because I didn't want him to shine before me. But whether you like being seen, or whether you are afraid of being seen, we are all called to shine. And Paul writes to the church in Philippi that you shine like stars in the universe. No matter who you are, if you become a Christian, you are a person who shines. And whether you prefer to hide or whether you would naturally be more likely to show off, know this: you are someone who shines. This is an extraordinary thing that Paul is writing to the church in Philippi, that they shine like stars in the universe. Back in the Old Testament, when God called Abraham, he said that his descendants would be like the stars in the sky. And Paul is saying this promise to Abraham is fulfilled in you. Isaiah the prophet spoke to the people of Israel and said to them that their calling was to be a light to the Gentiles. And then in their history, they kept on failing to live up to that calling. But Paul is saying to the church in Philippi, you are fulfilling that part of the call of Israel. And then there's Daniel. Back in the Old Testament, there's not very much indication of a belief in an afterlife. At that time, the hope of Israel was very much for this life, and there's almost anything about life after death. But we have these few hints, and almost one of the first indications of a belief in life after death is found in Daniel 12, where Daniel has this vision where he sees people sleeping and then rising. And he says in Daniel chapter 12 that the wise, the righteous, will rise from the dead, and they will shine like stars. So this was the hope of Israel, that in the future, beyond death, they might be able to live this radiant, glorious, shining life. And Paul is saying that this hope is something you have now. If you become a Christian, if you choose to follow Jesus, this is not something for the future. You shine now. You shine like stars. And so for me personally, as someone who's wanted to avoid the limelight, I'm coming to realize that I'm supposed to shine, that we're all supposed to shine. And when I was growing up in this church, I never wanted to be someone who was seen. When the children used to come forward for the songs, I used to stay in the pew. I didn't want to be seen. And then I used to sit, when I was a teenager, in the Resurrection Chapel through there, so that I was out the way and not seen. I was once called up by someone on staff and said, "Oh, would you ever like to do a reading at one of the services?" And I said, "No, I would not ever like to do a reading at one of the services." But it was at Focus last year. And Focus for me has always been a time of resetting my faith, of getting a clear idea of what God is calling me to do for the next stage. And at Focus last summer, this was the thing that really struck me. It was that I didn't need to hide, and that all of us are people who are meant to shine. And I think of that for this church. This is a church that shines. You, as a church, have an extraordinary role in the world. You are an example and an inspiration to so many churches around the country and around the world. You shine as a church. But also each of you individually. In your families, in your workplaces, with your friends, in your universities. Each of you will shine. This is just part of what it means to be a Christian. And so the tragedy in life is not that there are so many people who want to be stars. The tragedy is that there are so many people who don't realize they already are. You are already stars. And Paul says to the church in Corinth, he's talking about Moses. Moses used to, in the Old Testament, he used to go and meet with God, and he would come out of the tent of meeting, and his face was shining. He was radiant, and he used to put a veil on to protect the Israelites from his brightness, from the shining that was coming from Moses. But this was special to Moses. It was only for him. But Paul writes to the church in Corinth that we all, with unveiled faces, reflect the Lord's glory. This is something for all of us. It's for me and for you. I am coming to realize that I am a star. And it's the same for you. Each of you is a star. And so we shine like stars. And in this passage, what we see is Paul's description of what it means to be a star, to be a superstar for Jesus. And the first thing is that we shine with this mixture of confidence and humility. We shine with confidence because the one who is in us is the one who makes us shine. We're not confident in ourselves. We're confident about the one who lives within us. Jesus is the light of the world, and his light shines within us and banishes the darkness from our lives. But the light is so powerful that it begins to shine out from us. And so our confidence is not based on ourselves or on our talents, on our abilities, on our energy, or anything else. Our confidence is based on the one who lives inside us and who causes us to shine. And so that means we don't need to be perfect or flawless. We're like light bulbs. The glass of a light bulb may not be particularly clean, it may be cracked, but it's the element within it that causes it to shine. And it's the same with us. We may not be perfectly clean, but we have Jesus within us, and he is the one who makes us shine. And so we don't need to be perfect. We only need to be full. And so we have this confidence. But we also have this humility. Paul says earlier that we work out our salvation with fear and trembling. Now, this phrase, fear and trembling, is one that occurs a couple of times in the Old Testament. And it occurs in Psalm 55, where the author of the psalm is pouring out his heart in weakness and in pain. He says, "My thoughts are troubled. My heart is in anguish. The terrors of death overwhelm me." He talks about horrors consuming him. Fear and trembling, he says, have beset me. And so it's in this awareness of weakness that we shine. Paul is saying we don't shine by trying to be shiny. We actually shine through our weakness. The light of Jesus that's within us shines out not through our successes, not through our strengths, but through our frailties and our failures. And that is how we shine. And so as a church, we go wrong when either we become too self-confident in ourselves or when we lose confidence in who God is. But we shine. The way we shine is as people who are filled with a confidence in God and a humility about ourselves. And that's how we shine, with a mixture of humility and confidence. Also with a mixture of purity and involvement. Paul says that he says, "Be blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation." Or it actually says the Greek is to be in the middle of a crooked and depraved generation. There is this calling both to be pure and blameless, but also in the midst of things. We are to be pure and blameless. The word is used pure, it's like pure gold. In other words, Paul is saying, don't let anything block the light that is shining from you. Be pure so that the light can shine out. But also be in the midst of things so that the light can be seen. Be in the midst of the darkest parts of the world. We are not called to withdraw or to hide or to detach ourselves. We are called to be involved, to be engaged, to be at the middle of things, even when these things are frightening. When we first moved to Brighton, our next door neighbour, we'd only been there for a few months, and our next door neighbour put up a sign in his window that said this: "God botherers, read this before knocking." He wasn't talking about Tara and me, because we hadn't knocked on his door, fortunately, by this stage. But someone else was obviously knocked on his door. "My lodger," he says, "my lodger needs her sleep as she works harder than you, doing real work in the real world. You have woken her on 3 occasions on her day off. You will not, capital letters, do this again. She has told you that she does not believe in, and then we have a list, a God who cannot be seen, touched, or felt, people allegedly being turned into pillars of salt, females being crafted from a spare rib, the world being created in 7 days, resurrections, leprechauns or pixies, little green men. She is concentrating on getting the sleep she needs on her day off for this life, the only life we have. If you want to do something useful in these end times, campaign for social justice and a fairer economic system in this life. If you knock at an unsociable hour, or any hour, you will be abused. It is totally up to you whether you knock." When I read that, I thought I might just leave him on his own. But then we had our water supply cut off, and I phoned Southern Water and asked them what to do. And they said, "Oh, you just need to find out if any of the other flats have had their water cut off." So then I had to go down and knock on his door with a little bit of anxiety. But actually, you know what? It was fine. And we ended up having a nice cup of tea, and everything was fine until he asked me what I did for a living. And then things got a bit more awkward. We are called to be both pure and involved. And again, the church goes wrong, either when we become too detached, too withdrawn from the world, or when we become indistinguishable from the world. But as people who shine, we are called to be pure and involved. We shine with a mixture of confidence and humility, of purity and involvement. And thirdly, we shine in the height and in the depths. Sheldon Van Auken, the 20th century poet who is American, he wrote his autobiography, A Severe Mercy, one of my favorite books, in which he talked about when he was 18 years old, right at the beginning of his life. He saw ahead of him two possible ways to live. One was the level plains, and the other was the heights and the depths. And he made this conscious decision at that moment in his life that he was going to aim for the heights and the depths instead of the level plains. And when you look at Paul's description of the Christian life, of those who shine like stars, you find this curious mixture of commands. On one level, he is talking about fear and trembling, about laboring, about service and sacrifice and suffering. But then on the other hand, he's talking about do not complain or grumble. And then talking about gladness and joy, gladness and joy. And it's this mixture of the kind of serious things and the very light things. But I suppose that's because that's what the world is really missing. We seem to live in a world that is both too shallow and too negative. And we are called to shine in the world in order to bring it depth and also to bring it lightness, to bring it joy. And actually, the best things in life are a mixture of those two things. The best TV and films manages to combine something serious and meaningful and profound with also something that is joyful and funny. And the best events in life are those ones where something significant is happening, but also there's a sense of joy and celebration, like a wedding. And the best friends that we have are those where we are capable of having deep and meaningful conversations with them, to cry with them when they will make sacrifices for us, and you can go through the deep and the difficult times with them, but also those with whom where we can laugh and play and celebrate. And that is the way in which we are called to shine. Some of us are very good at the serious things, but less good at the joy and gladness. Others of us are good at the joy and gladness, but not so good at the serious things. But those who shine are called to embrace both the heights and the depths, not being intense and not being shallow, but embracing both of them. And this is how Paul lived. And this is how Paul lived, particularly in Philippi, before this church was founded that he was writing to. For when Paul was in Philippi, he was arrested, he was beaten, he was flogged, and he was put in prison. And he was put in chains. But then there was an earthquake, and he was set free. And he sang, before that, he was singing hymns of praise in the middle of the night. And then there's this earthquake, and they're set free, and the jailer becomes a Christian, and all his family, and all his household. And it's this sense of great difficulty, but also great successes and fruitfulness. And it says in that story in Acts that Paul was right in the middle room of that jail, and all the other prisoners could hear him. He was shining. And when was it? It says it was in the middle of the night, when it was darkest. Paul and Silas, who were in that prison, shone brightest. And I know that within my life, that the most difficult times, the times of struggle and disappointment and tragedy and illness, they haven't been experiences that have stopped me shining. And they have been the very opportunities where I could shine brightest. We are to shine in the heights and the depths. But more than anything, we shine because we are loved. Paul starts this whole section by addressing the church in Philippi as the beloved, those who are loved. And actually, more than anything, that's what makes people shine. It's when they know, when they've experienced the love of God. For it is the love of God that both humbles us and builds us confidence. It's the love of God that purifies our souls and propels us into the darkest places. It's the love of God that enables us to travel through the depths and reach new heights. It's the love of God that causes us to shine. And it's the love of God which is shown most clearly on the cross. For there are two people in the Bible who are described as the morning star. One is Satan, and the other is Jesus Christ. And Satan was the angel that shone brightest before he fell. But he shone so brightly that he didn't want anyone else to shine. And so Satan works, the enemy works, to try and stop us shining. And he will do all he can to chip away your confidence or to build your pride. He will try and isolate you and make you slip into the shadows. He will try and make you indistinguishable from the world. He will try and keep you just at zero rather than embracing the heights and the depths. But Jesus is the morning star who's shone even brighter. And his longing is that each one of us would shine. And in order to enable us to shine, he was willing to go to the cross. And it says that on the cross, darkness covered the land. The morning star embraced darkness in order that each one of us might shine. And then the Holy Spirit pours into our hearts that very same love in order that we might be filled with the light of Christ and might shine like stars in the universe.
I'm Bear Grylls. My favourite way to start the day, the Bible in 1 year. That's how wild I am.
Find out more at BibleIn1year.org or download the Bible in 1 Year app.